If we want to start there at the end, and Taylor, if you just want to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and your connection to food.
Good afternoon. My name is Taylor Troxel. Over here from Augusta County. I am an associate grocery coordinator with Whole Foods Market Mid-Atlantic, and my connection to food runs pretty deep. It goes back to growing up in Amherst County and getting most of my goods from neighbors, local farmers, that sort of thing. Grocery stores weren't exactly real quick to get to anywhere. So being able to get to know the producers of my food at a very young age sort of set me on my path through college and my restaurant experience prior to working in retail.
And I'm his wife, Kelly Troxel. I am a first grade teacher in Harrisonburg City Schools and a mother of 2 young children. So food's very important to us, obviously, as a family. I grew up in Fluvanna County, Virginia, with a lot of my friends being farm kids. So I spent a lot of time on the farms, having fun. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Annie Clay. I come from Amelia County Public Schools, and that's a very small school division, and so I wear many hats, one of them being Food and Nutrition Services Manager, and that's what brings me to this panel today.
I'm Katie Harvell. I work part-time in an investment bank, and I am a full-time mom to a 2- and 8-year-old boy. Our 2-year-old has dairy, soy, and peanut allergy, and that's what brings me here today.
I'm June Cron. I have a bachelor's degree in foods and nutrition. I taught foods and nutrition for 28 years at the college level and quit about 7 years ago to help out on our family farm. We have beef and dairy.
Thank you guys. So as you can see, we have a pretty diverse panel across the board here today, and that's what I'm excited about. You guys were each asked here for a specific reason, for a specific perspective and opinion that you bring to the table, so we're glad you're here. So I'm just going to start you off with an easy one. When you hear the term farmer, what image pops into your mind, and why do you think that's the image that pops into your mind?
I can start, I guess.
Sure.
Growing up amongst farms, farmer to me has always meant where I get my food in a very literal sense. I understand that our food systems bring us food from many different ways from many different places. But for me, growing up and today, on our weekend trips to local farmers markets, it is quite literally the source of our eggs, our meat, our butter. It's how we feed our kids and our family.
For me, farmer, it is, the root of where I come from. So I grew up surrounded by farms and farm kids, like I said before. So a farmer to me is rooted in family. It's tradition. You have the salt of the earth when you are talking to a farmer. They are some of the hardest working people. So.
I'm probably the oldest one on this panel, so I grew up looking at westerns all of the time, and it was almost always about a farmer, some kind of farmer, a farmer who farmed the land, cattle, chicken farmers, and Amelia is a big farming community. They do plants and they do a lot of chicken and everything, and so when I think of a farmer, I see my dad who would plant squash and greens in different places. But I also think about the people that I work with and that I see who have big farming businesses, and they are involved in every aspect of the farming business because it's more than just how they feed their family, it's how they make their living, and they pass it on to their children. So I see a lot of different faces when I see a farmer.
Very good. Do you want? So we're going to jump from that, and thank you guys for just saying top of the mind what comes to mind when you think of a farmer. In relation to what you just said, what, in your opinion, what's the state of American agriculture? And does that contrast with your traditional view of a farmer?
So the state of agriculture for me now, particularly as a consumer day to day, I feel like is really good. I don't think 25 years ago I would have had it as easy as a time shopping for my family at the farm stand, so to speak. I have ample opportunities to purchase meat, eggs, produce from a pretty small radius around Stanton where we live, be it a quick jump to Harrisonburg, Nelson County, or right down at the Stanton Farmers Market. We're able to purchase literally farm-to-table staples for our family with little effort, and I couldn't be happier about it. We use these opportunities to teach our children where our food comes from and to respect and appreciate those things, to teach them about the seasons and seasonality, to teach them about proper methods and methodologies behind food production, and so we get to kill a lot of birds with one stone on Saturday and Sunday mornings. So I couldn't be happier with it on a micro level right now.
Taylor, can I ask you then, on a more macro level, thinking about perhaps your position or a more global view of the state of American agriculture? Could you talk about that?
Again, great. It's not very difficult to serve customers of any sort of needs, whether they're dietary needs or whether they're ideological needs. Our sourcing practices are pretty loose compared to the rest of the industry, and don't come up against many roadblocks. We're having local meetings for producers every time we open a new store, and it's lines and hours of work by dozens of people to get all these local producers set up and on a good path.
Thanks. Anybody else? The state of American agriculture?
I think living on a farm, I think the farmer probably feels he doesn't get the support that he really needs, that a lot of the public are looking at them as the bad guys that are putting all these poisons in the ground, poisons on their food. So I think that the farmer probably feels isolated and feels like that the public doesn't really support them the way they should be.
I think farmers are extremely proud people. They're proud of what they do. They're proud of the product that they put out. And they work very hard, and they should be proud. And I think because of the new focus that's on the things that we're eating, the nutritional value, the chemicals and everything that's going into everything, I think more people are becoming more respectful of farmers and what they do. We just take for granted, a lot of times we just go to the store and that's where we get our stuff. And nobody takes the time to think about what happens between the store and the farmland. And so right now, we're at a point now where the focus now is on that dash in between, and we're growing in knowledge. And so that's got to be good. And there are other things that are growing with that, GMOs and all of that stuff, but that's another conversation. We do respect the farmers should be respected, but there are other things. There's such big farming now that's going on that takes away from what the traditional farmer has set out there.
Can you elaborate on that perhaps a bit, Annie, and maybe anybody else who wants to chime in, as far as your distinction between farmers right now and a traditional farmer? Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
I'm thinking, when I think of a traditional farmer, I think of a farmer who knows, he goes to southern states in Amelia, he gets his seed, and, he plants that. And that's what he's been planting year after year, and he knows what kind of product he's going to put out, and he knows, that this is what he's doing. When I think of the big farmer now who's in it to produce a crop that may not, that rejects a certain kind of disease or a certain kind of something, you know, and we don't know enough about it, you know, to say whether it's good or bad. But the government has said it's not too bad that we can't have it. So, you know, there's a lot of things. People are in it for a lot of reasons. They're in it for because this is what they do. This is what their life is. But they're also in it because, you know, I can make some money out of this, because we transport abroad a whole lot of product. We really do. And so there's money to be made, and that might be generating some stuff.
And it's interesting, we were having just this conversation at lunch that, you know, the view we have about as diverse of a panel, from someone who lives on a farm to someone who's far removed from a farm, you know, and somebody that's serving consumers within their career. And, you know, that is one thing that is always driving the issues that we often find in agriculture, is that as a community, incredibly hardworking, incredibly stoic, and incredibly quiet, right? So when things come up in the media, or when something goes viral on Facebook or whatever, and it's an anti-agricultural movement, or it's targeting a specific group or somebody who's producing, the one thing we are really good at is lowering our head and going back to work, and not having this conversation and not seeking out the point of view. Because the fact of the matter is, and one thing that we really uncovered during the Farming Leaders event, is that when your opinion is your opinion, it's a valid opinion no matter where you stand, right? To that person, to that consumer, it's valid to them. And, you know, just in listening to this, that's the sort of thing that we start to see, where, you know, you have somebody that's selling agricultural products saying, hey, state of American agriculture is fantastic. And somebody from that farm view saying, we catch a lot of grief. We, as a community, don't talk about it and come the other way.
So I'm going to piggyback off of what Jesse just said, and Annie, some points that you've brought up. Are farmers or agriculture in general, are we transparent? Are we transparent enough? Don't all jump at once.
I think sometimes it can be hard to talk about transparency when there isn't a real fluid conversation in existence. That's sort of the foundation, right? So I can say from my personal perspective, when I go to a farm or to a listen to local producers talk about their crop or their animals, all I get from them is typically passion and an intense investment in what they're doing. And a lot of that is dates back to their, you know, generations of that production. And some of it is 25, 26, 27-year-old essentially kids who are just into being outside and producing things, consumables that folks enjoy. So I think taking our children to farmers markets and to farms where things are made, and allowing the farmers and producers to be in their space and speak about what they enjoy and are passionate about, is a really good place to start there. And we, as consumers, have to be willing to make that adjustment and to play an active part in bridging that gap.
We do a lot of farm tours, school groups at the farm, but in the back of your mind, you're always worried that you're going to get that one person who's going to take something the wrong way. I mean, there's been incidents in the news that people video things that happened on the farms that wasn't necessarily the farmer's fault. And so you're always kind of cautious about bringing people in, because you don't know how they're going to react to the situation, and maybe they don't understand what's happening. For instance, if you have a cow that's down, she's got to get up, she's got to walk. And sometimes, you know, the things that you have to do to get that cow up, like shocking her with a shocker, people don't understand. But if you want that cow to live, she's got to get up. So it's kind of hard to be totally transparent.
So something that might be of interest for the panel, this is where that audience participation part comes in. for your farming operations, can you just show the panel by raising your hand, how many of you all are hesitant to have just general consumers on your farm? Is that surprising to you all? Yeah? Why does it surprise you?
Because I know one of the farmers that runs her. And she's so open about what they do that for me to see that she, you know, is hesitant to have someone there, that's surprising to me. Because I often think that it's not our farmers, not our local farmers who are afraid of it because they're just doing what they do. I generally think it's those big, you know, money-making machines that, you know, don't want people in there. So that is surprising to me.
Speaking from a consumer point of view, growing up, I'd go to Food Lion and with my parents and shop for the week, and I never questioned where my food was coming from. But I think what has happened over the past 30 years is an evolution in education. And there's so much information out there now that the consumers have these questions. And what the problem is I'm not a farmer. So when I go to a farm and I see something like a cow being prodded, I'm looking at that from a human standpoint and not from a farmer's standpoint. But what I appreciate about the farmers that we have relationships with is the openness to educate. Because once it's explained to me, it makes sense.
All right, so I'm gonna piggyback off that, Kelly, and thank you. And this is one of the questions that came in on today's meet. So where do you go? Where's your source of information if you see a news story come across, or you read something in your Facebook feed, or you someone mentions something to you at work? Where do you go for information to research that? Where would you go?
My first thing is the internet. I go there. You know, if I see something that disturbs me or I have a question, I try to research it to see if it's an validity to it or a reason behind it. I don't have a problem asking anybody anything either. So.
Okay. So the internet or asking. Anybody else? Where do you go to question something that you've heard about agriculture or farming?
I mean, for me, it's really difficult to disseminate information, I think, anymore. There is so much out there with regard to, when you're talking about science, there's so much out there that's funded, very little that's independent. And honestly, the reason we purchase food the way we purchase food as a family is because we're sort of from the horse's mouth kind of folks, and we need folks that are generally invested in the business of production to tell me what's going on. If I know that I'm not a farmer, I have great relationships with farmers, but still, I'm not going to suppose a .com or .org is going to have any better or more information than the family that sells me eggs down the street. They're the ones that can really put a proper educated filter on what you get in the news. Because first of all, what you get in the news initially is some sort of title that's supposed to reel you in. And unfortunately, in a lot of outlets, mainly mainstream national outlets, you're getting things that are going to scare you. That's the hook. So then you have to, again, like I said before, back it way down to the micro level and talk to the folks that you trust. And
Katie, so you have a child that has very specific dietary needs. So specifically for an instance like yours, obviously you have pediatricians and things, but when you're in mom mode, where are you sourcing your information from? What avenues do you get special dietary need information from?
Well, the allergy is dairy and soy, so we pretty much avoid dairy and soy with him. The internet, is probably the first. Like Annie said, I Google, and then I think it'd be helpful to have more available resources for somebody like me to be able to go and ask for help. Because other than the internet, pediatrician, and then I just read labels, as I'm grocery shopping, that's pretty much the resources I have.
So as a consumer, as you go and you're looking for this information, do you ever end up feeling misled that you read one article and it says, hey, your child's probably developed an allergy because of this thing, and it's probably a farmer, or whatever the case is. And then you read research that's in a different place. As a consumer, how does that feel? Because as you guys said, it's kind of one-sided. We know what we do and what goes into it, so we don't ever really think of it from that angle of this confusing world.
I try to, when I do Google these issues, I try to read as many articles as I can. I don't just find one and focus in on that. I try to, I spend a lot of time just reading as much as I can on it.
So we've kind of skirted around this, and I've heard it come up through several conversations. I'm just going to ask you, in your opinion, thinking about a farm or a ranch, we don't have many of those around here, but specifically a farm, how big is too big, and how much profit is too much profit? Like, what's your kind of go-to when you think about that?
Farmers have to make a living like everybody else, so I don't know that you can say there's too much profit or too big. I mean, as long as it's operated right, it doesn't matter.
Thank you.
And as long as there's a healthy, healthy competition, you know what I'm saying? I think make as much money as you can. Good, great, give me some. But not at the expense of the smaller farmer. You know what I'm saying? There needs to be something, that, it's like when Walmart comes into a small town, and all those small grocery stores went out of business. That happened in my area. You don't want that to happen to the farmer, because that farmer is supplying somebody with something that they want, so.
Have you ever heard anybody in agriculture talk about the fact that it's very complicated to be a small farm, and it's very complicated to be a large farm, and that it's this middle ground? So it's actually harder to survive as a small farm. Have you ever ran across any information like that? Because that's a pretty common thing in agriculture, that when you talk about scaling farming operations, very, very difficult to be a teeny little farm, in a big world.
Well, if you're selling eggs by the dozen for $3 or $4 a dozen, you're going to have to sell an awful lot of eggs to make a living. So that's why it's very difficult to be a small farmer.
Anybody else in response to Jess's question? All right, let's take a turn here. And I know you guys are coming from different backgrounds. Some look at food through like a dietary lens or an allergy lens. Others through a local lens, or through a larger purchasing scale lens. So how do you think that unique view of agriculture interacts with and influences your purchasing decisions?
I guess as a nutritionist, I look for things that are nutritious. And if you're going into a grocery store, you purchase most of your food from the outside of the grocery store. That's where you find milk, meats, breads, produce, the unprocessed foods. Purchase foods that are in their natural state as much as possible. You don't want foods that has those 15-letter words you can't pronounce to eat, because most of those are preservatives. And so just try to get food as close as you can to what it comes out of the ground. That's, from a nutritional standpoint, the fresher the better. It's going to have the most nutrients in it.
I agree with you. I was taught to shop the perimeter of the grocery store. And then also based on season. I'm probably not going to go buy strawberries right now. You know, things like that I look for a lot this season. You know, USA labeling is one of my big deciding factors too.
Okay. So we're gonna hop off of that and talk about labels for a second. So up here on the screen, you've got just some wording, not the actual labels, but just some wording of things that you might see attached to packages in the grocery store. So thinking about that, do labels affect your food purchases or do they not affect your food purchases? Talk with us about that. Kelly, I can see your finger on the button.
You want to go first?
Okay.
They heavily affect our food purchases.
Okay.
And honestly, a large reason that we buy so much of our food from the farm is because we then don't have to deal with that. Yeah. So that being said, I think some folks subscribe to the thought that as long as it's got fewer than 4 or 5 ingredients, we're good to go. I'm a little opposite because I do have such a passion for food, both as a cook, as a former chef, and in my current position, that I want as much of this as I can get. And disseminating the information that it presents isn't very difficult for me, but then my friends and family, if they get anything near this, they can't, they're just going to put it back. They can't, it's not even, it's overwhelming. Because not only, it's one thing to receive information, which is what we all want, but then it's another to feel ignorant or to feel overwhelmed by the information being presented.
I'm learning. Cage-free, I thought that meant something, that the chickens were, you know, better than the ones that are. So that draws me in, you know, for some reason. I don't know. But, you know, it was on the label, so that meant something. I thought it did.
Just FYI, the panelists will be around afterwards if you would like to have a personal conversation with any of them about anything that they've set up here specifically. So I'm gonna pull one more question and then we'll actually open it up to the audience for questions. So hold on just a second. Thinking about, you know, you often hear that the world population is just really going to explode. Looking forward to 2050 and 9 billion people, and that's a lot of mouths. How do you see these farmers here in the room, the farmers in Virginia, the farmers in the U.S., how do you see them playing into it? And do you see any challenges with it?
They're going to have to be as efficient as they can be, and unfortunately that might mean bigger.
Anybody else? Future guest?
Going back to the transparency part that you were talking about, I think that if you, when Kelly and I talk about the reason we buy local is to circumvent the label, also we buy domestic, and by domestic it doesn't mean within the United States, but also as close as we can get to our home, because again, you don't have to wonder, you don't have to do all the research, you don't have to make a guess on something that you're putting into you and your child's body. I think as we, obviously we participate in a global market, we have to be as transparent as possible so that we can know what we're purchasing from our fellow citizens and feel comfortable with that.
So one of the things that might, again, just kind of be a point of interest for you all before we move off to this slide and out to the audience is that the labels that you see there in food packaging are largely unregulated, which is why you can have GMO-free eggs or, you know, all the other bizarre things that pop up, vegetarian broccoli, you know. And, you know, again, asking for your all's participation, knowing that this room is filled with folks from agriculture, how many folks are really frustrated by the fact that there is no regulation behind words like that on packaging?
And not just from a farmer's point of view, but also from a nutritionist's point of view. It's very frustrating.
And I think really everybody in here would agree, it's frustrating for us from agriculture that you're being misled, because we're not trying to mislead you. We would prefer a world of no labels. It's not the world that we live in, but the folks that are producing the food aren't misleading the consumer. The folks that package the food do that, and then it skips over them, and the negative press and the bad connotations for certain words, that skips over the people that package it and goes back to the people that make the food.
So at this point, we have more questions on our page. If y'all would like to ask questions from the audience, I think these guys are ready for you.
I'm an apple grower, Tommy Revere, Dickey Brothers Orchards in Nelson County. And we run a small retail store. And the biggest problem we have is people come up to us are these organic apples. And I was just wondering if the panel knows actually what organic means.
It means very little because it means naturally grown, that's all. I mean, it doesn't mean that it received any kind of special treatment. So organic is a very misleading word.
Anybody else's thoughts on organic versus non-organic?
Don't they need to be treated to prevent bugs and diseases, all crops?
Well, yes and no, but the biggest thing that we have, people come in and say, organic means they haven't been sprayed. To them, most people think that organic totally means there's no pesticides at all, and that's totally untrue. And people don't realize that, and that's the big, and it's a gimmick, it's a marketing ploy. Some people who go through the organic certification deserve that labeling that's true to what they do. But again, it's lack of education really, and I don't know quite how to get it out there.
Any other thoughts on the organic versus non from our consumers? Any questions that perhaps have been jarred by that?
I think some people think organic food has superior nutrient value, and none of the studies have proven this. They're equal in nutrient value. And in fact, some studies have shown they're higher in bacteria content because of the type of fertilizers that they use. So, if you trade a little pesticide residue for maybe some Listeria or E. coli, so you need to be careful.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Jesse, hold on just a
Oh,
second.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
To the point also is organic doesn't mean the same thing for every product either. Buying an organic banana or an organic avocado that is minimally treated to begin with and features a pretty sturdy skin, it's not the same as your grape or your potato that has a thinner skin or typically needs to be treated or grows in the ground where there could be potentially runoff issues. It is education. You have to know what you want. You can't treat your food sources with single word explanations. It's just, it isn't that easy.
Thanks, Taylor.
I have a question, and I think we've skirted the finances part of agriculture. And that being, not necessarily from you, but from your friends, from other circles in life that you go through. Do you believe that they have a good knowledge of the state of affairs, of financial state of affairs of farmers at this time? When you work for an employed by a company, sometimes they offer you a 401k. 401ks for farmers are generally they're farm. It is not, in an account in a bank. Do you think people really understand that and understand that farmers at this time have been going multiple years in the red? Did they even know it? And would it make an impact if they did? You're fine, go ahead.
No, I don't think they know it, and for a lot of people, they don't care. And I think that has to do with marketing, you know, because they don't see you as real to their life because they go to the store and they buy their product, and the product is always there. So they don't think about you as an individual, like they go out to work and do whatever they have to do. That's just my opinion, but I'm looking at me, because I work with the purchasing of food, you know, it opened the door for me to learn some other things, but before then, I didn't care as long as it was at the grocery store when I got there.
Thank you for your honest answer, and I appreciate that.
I think across socioeconomic groups, we have a pretty narrow view of what value is. And I think most folks think that value is getting the most for the least amount of money. And you don't really analyze what your dollar is voting for, so to speak, or producing on an economic scale when it comes to your neighbors who are trying to make a living, or on a health scale when you're trying to nourish the folks at home. I really appreciate eggs that come from chickens that eat grubs. I like a bright yellow center, and I like the flavor and the protein to that, and I pay 50 cents an egg. That is a priority and a value that I personally have, but my next door neighbor, who may not be on the same budget as me, or who may not have the same priorities that I do, has a different association with that value, with what value is, and wants their eggs for 14 cents. So we need to have honest and real conversations around value, what that means to us.
Thank you, Taylor.
Who else has a question for the consumers?
Thank you all for being here. My name is Julie Williamson. I'm the president of Culpeper County Farm Bureau, and you've hit a lot of touchy spots. We have a horse farm. I often have people in and out of my barn, whether I know they're necessarily coming or not, just because of our business practices and the way we keep our animals. I really try that anybody could drop in at any point, and I'd be happy to show them the barn. We work really hard at that, but there's still things they're not going to understand. And, you know, and so if I'm not there to explain why that horse is off by himself for some reason. So that's why I wasn't sure how to answer that. I'm always happy to have someone come in. To just come in when no one's there terrifies me. And I also don't want them having their child reach out and their hand disappear into that horse's mouth that doesn't understand it shouldn't. So those are the other things we deal with. But going back to the food issues, I'm curious what kind of premium that you're willing to pay for convenience. You know, you talk about going to Food Lion and finding antibiotic-free chicken. Those of us in the room know all of them are going to be antibiotic-free. Are you willing to come to the farm and buy a chicken that still looks like a chicken? It's fresh. It's local. Do we get back to farmers markets where we have live animals there and someone's going to take them home and process them? But those are things that go into this, and I can assure you that any of us that process animals in any way, shape, or form, least favorite thing we do. Those are things that go on in our world that is being paid for, and so there is that mass production end of it. And we're still really local. We're still your neighbors, and we're still, we're trying to pay for that $50,000 tractor. And so do you think that we're getting to a place where the consumer is willing to pay 50 cents an egg? I love you. Come on by. You're not the one we see. I would love you. But so that convenience factor. How much are you willing to do on your own and still pay for us to be able to afford you that?
I think it goes back to the value point. We were talking about at lunch how being able to take our children to a farm to purchase food is an event. We get to be outside, we get to have an educational experience, we get to be with the family, and we also get to do the chore of purchasing food. And to me, that's that. There's a lot of value in that, and buying a 50-cent egg is fine with me. I would love to be able to get a chicken with its neck and its feet, so I can make some stock on the regular, the way you're supposed to. And I think in our situation in Stanton, what we've seen is our local farm-to-table restaurants. We don't have many, but we have a few. Are really opening up people's eyes to seeing what an animal goes through from birth to table, so to speak, and being able to get so less squeamish about what we do so sort of innately at a store purchasing out of a piece of styrofoam or plastic wrap.
And when the farmers markets close, as they have now pretty much for the season until spring, you know, we shop at Martin's, and what I, as a consumer, appreciate is the diversity that now exists within the grocery store. The labeling is confusing, but that's where, you know, I'm thankful that Taylor has the job he has, where I can ask somebody who is already educated about those things. So I'm not getting duped into buying something that has a higher price, but really it's just a higher price. It's not a better quality of meat that I'm purchasing. So I appreciate there being a diversity.
Thanks for the question, Julie.
I think another piece that's in there is when we're talking about this, we're talking about a uniquely American problem when it comes to dealing with consumers. You know, my wife and I were fortunate enough to go with the Virginia Tech Dairy Club and spend some time where they made fun of our refrigerators because we have enormous refrigerators and we go to the store and buy all our stuff, where they very much have that farmer's market mentality. Like, I'm going to be home 30 minutes later because I have to stop and pick up my items and go cook. You know, what we're talking about is where we have underperformed as American agriculturalists, pushing toward that system, that it is a more natural piece, but it also comes from a consumer demand of ease of access. You know, do you want to spend time breaking down the chicken? I don't know.
Say it louder.
And do you know how to break that? No, but I imagine he knows how to cook it. Follow it on Facebook.
I got
So my
that
name
call,
is-
just last week, they asked me, how do you kill a chicken? Put it in a pot. I literally, they called me, go to the store and get it. If you don't go, go to the store and get it.
Hi, so my name is Colby Jones Drinkwater. I'm a dairy farmer in Dinwiddie County, so right next door to you. And we had some of your Head Start class come out to the farm this fall, so thank you. First, I just want to thank y'all for coming out today, because I imagine it's not easy to sit in front of a bunch of farmers and be asked questions and have us all silently and secretly judging what you said.
Thank you, Colby, for just saying that.
Ease the tension in the room. But on the flip side, it would also be hard for us to sit in front of people who are not familiar with agriculture and to be, you know, asked questions that we're concerned with. So thank you very much for coming out today, because we realize this is not easy, but glad that you were here. So I kind of have a two-part question, and the first part has to do with this conversation has been eye-opening for me today. We do tours on the dairy farm in October. Only 4 days this October we didn't have school groups on. And when I do tours, I'm, you know, educational component for the students, but also trying to work in some stuff for the adults. So I would like to think that I'm pretty familiar with the consumer wants. Y'all have said things that have blown me away and have made me realize I need to shift my perspective and have a little more conversation myself. So my first part of my question is, building on this framework today that Farm Bureau has set down for us, starting this conversation, what are some things that events or social activities where consumers such as yourself or people just not engaged in agriculture can talk to a farmer? What kind of things would grab your attention and you would show up? Like if we did a panel of farmers somewhere that you could ask honest questions and have them answered from, you know, maybe a small chicken you buy 50 cents eggs from to, you know, the poultry grower just down the street. What would engage you and help us continue this conversation?
Thanks, Colby. Maybe a day on the farm. You know, advertise, and I mean, I'd love to take my kids out and have them see what you do firsthand. I don't see a lot of advertising. I don't know a lot of farmers.
Do we feel unapproachable?
I just don't know how to reach you. You know, when I go home, what do? Google farmers. Farmers near me.
I think, you know, we're here today, you know, and y'all are all here today, and it's good, and I know that there's lots of marketing and stuff going on, but not the kind of marketing that shows exactly who you are and what you do. You know, we see these slick commercials, and we see these people, you know, with their cows and stuff, but it's a slick commercial. I don't need a slick commercial. What I need to learn is to see somebody real and talking about their real life, and not always just talking about the product after it's at the store, but what you're doing now. And that's not going to be anything that's going to bring any money into your pocket, but what it does, it gets people to understand who you are and what you're doing. And so that's part of, you know, like in here today, we learned that all these labels are misleading. I don't know who else is with me, but I learned a lot. And so now I'm going to be more, I'm going to inspect a lot more than I did before I came here. So in order to know this stuff, it needs to be some kind of focus on who you really are.
Okay, did you say something? Okay. That kind of leads me into the second part of my question. So we can actually make money by you visiting our farms, and that actually, during October, our farm does a pumpkin patch and corn maze, and it will be the only month this year we make money, to be quite honest, because it's tough in agriculture. So please come visit our farms, and Google is not a bad way to get started on that. That's how, I'd say, half the people who showed up at our farm found us. So with that in mind, how far are you willing to travel to visit a farm? How much time do you want to spend once you get there? And how much are you willing to pay? I mean, do you just want to pay $5? The equivalent of taking your family to the movies, or the equivalent of taking your family to an amusement park? Knowing that that is helping to support your farmer and keep them in business.
Hope they answer it as much as
Right? I think what you do when you invite a consumer to your livelihood is you're attaching a face, you're attaching a family, and you're pulling at the heartstrings. The question was asked about, you know, did we understand the struggle that farmers go through? No, because we're wrapped up in our own lives doing what we do day to day. But if I have the opportunity to spend time with you and see what you do, I'm much more likely to spend money on your farm because I know your name, you've shared your story and your struggle, and I'll keep coming back because now I have a friend, I have a connection. That first adventure out there might be difficult to get to you, but once I've made that connection, I'm going to keep coming back. Yeah.
One thing, and you were asking what would entice a family or folks to come out to the farm. It is also difficult when you, so your farm focuses on corn or focuses on dairy. It can be difficult to fill a whole captivating day for a family. And what we've had a lot of experience with is wine tours and the Bourbon Trail out in Kentucky and those sorts of things, and working with neighboring farms to create a circuit of education where you can go from place to place and learn a little bit. I mean, we go to Oak Hill, which is an hour and 20 minutes for us, and the kids do the corn maze, and we go to the shop, and we get a really solid education, I feel like, every time we go there on corn production. And it was based in a gimmick because we wanted to go, the kids wanted to go to the maze. But we passed 5, 6, 7, 8 farms on the way out there that are producing, but there's barely even a sign outside. So, I think creating, you were talking earlier today about unity, creating community circuits for your neighbors to learn about what's going on a little more grander scale I would be into that, for sure.
I have a question to kind of tag off of that, if you will, and I think some of what Coley is asking. So not every farm is set up for visitors,
Right.
and I say that simply because it takes a special farm family and an agritourism bent and a chance to connect. There's biosecurity that goes into it, and there's liabilities with large animals, and that all sorts of things. So do you perceive perhaps the pumpkin patch that has the petting zoo attached to it versus perhaps the poultry farm that's right next door, or the dairy that doesn't accept, school groups or visitors? Do you perceive them differently?
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I probably don't perceive them much at all because I don't notice that they're there. And that is, that's my fault as a neighbor and as a consumer. And, but as Kelly said, everybody gets wrapped up in their own lives and what their chores are for the day, and you go about it, and unless it seems like there's a notification on your phone or a neon sign, a lot goes unnoticed. And certainly not trying to be unsympathetic to the challenges or make it sound like it's something simple that just isn't being done. That's not at all my angle for sure, but I would say it probably goes unperceived in most cases.
In talking about perception, something that's come off of the panel a few times and then is very clear, here in this audience, several of you have said it in kind of different ways, you need to show us who you are, and on the other hand, it's this premise that some farm operations are big corporations or multi-million-dollar entities. Again, asking for audience participation. If you're CEO, president, board of directors, and everybody is from the same family and you're a family-owned operation, you just raise your hand. Your farm, is your farm family-owned? That's the common who we are. It's very unusual that a large corporation owns and operates a farm. In fact, a majority of American farms are owned by people in this room. Do you have a question?
I'm going to go a little different. I'm a teacher, so education is very important. And I like that you asked, how do we make ourselves more approachable to you? But I'm thinking about the bad stuff that you see and that you read. And we all talk about it ourselves, and we're like, oh, that's not agriculture. What is the best way for us to communicate that to you? Because a lot of times we don't tell our story. We just keep farming and keep going. But what's the best avenue for us to reach our communities and not feel like we're pushy or we're educating down to you?
Well, I think social media is where we get all of our bad stuff. So it would probably be a place where we get our good stuff too. We buy the folks that grow our eggs and the lamb and pork that we eat live about 3 miles down the street from my mom. And when you go to them at the farmer's market, they're like, hey, go look at our YouTube channel. And you go to their YouTube channel, and it's it's them slapping pigs or getting eggs out before the farmer's market, and the kids think it's cute, and I think it's extremely convenient. And it's projected through a medium that is comfortable and familiar and safe, really for everybody. The farmer controls the content, and the consumer it gets it from the same source that they're getting all that nasty stuff that you're talking about.
And I don't consider it being, educated down to when I go to an orchard, as the gentleman stated before, and somebody's asking if it's organic, and in their brain that's spraying. But him taking that opportunity to explain, well, this is what that means to the consumer, because they don't know. It's whatever they've read about or seen on social media, that they've come to him, with little education, and it's the buzzword. So it's very much, I think, a part of the farmer's responsibility to, if asked, to then explain it.
Any other thoughts?
I don't think that every farmer is going to want to tell who they are in that sense, but I think one farmer can probably speak for a lot of farmers. And I think Farm Bureau has a big enough organization where they could be the source of the information. And I'm sure that you have enough farmers in here that have a story to tell. And Farm Bureau being the source of putting that information out there. And then educators would have a source to go to. So I think that's a conversation that can begin.
We have time for one more question. Uh-oh, dueling questions. 2 if you're quick.
I just want to thank you all for coming out as well. Quick question, there seems to be a lot of negative connotation with large farms, and I'm just kind of curious about that, because a lot of large farms, as was stated earlier, are family owned, and the reason that they tend to get large is so that their children and grandchildren can keep a part in that. So as a consumer, with that negative connotation being associated, how can those large farms, in your eyes, kind of do away with that negative connotation and have that same relationship that you envision with the local small guy down the street when they take just as much care of their animals and their products that they produce?
For us, it goes back to education again. I mean, I don't know what a large farm is. I mean, I don't know if it's your parcel, if it's your income, if it's your production volume. I don't, in my mind, the size of the operation doesn't really enter my top tier priorities. Because incidentally, as I go through my top tier priorities, I feel like, and this isn't based in anything real, I feel like as I go through my priority list, the large farms probably get filtered out of there. But again, in my mind, large farm is a factory operation. And I know for a fact, living in the Shenandoah Valley, that a large farm and a factory operation aren't even the same thing. But specifically, what they are, it's not. I don't have anything concrete formed in my head around that.
So if I say factory farm or factory operation, what's the first thing that pops into your brain if I say that? And let's just go down the road here quick.
The first thing that pops into my mind is feeding the largest amount of people for the lowest cost.
Okay.
I just picture a lot of animals in a closed space, one on top of another.
Okay. Annie, if I say factory farm or factory, what does that conjure in your mind?
I'm thinking about someone who is trying to find methods to increase production by any means necessary.
Okay. Katie, do you have a thought on factory farm?
The first image and thought came to mind was overcrowded space with animals.
Okay.
I don't think there are factory farms. A farm is a farm, a factory is a factory. I mean, you're dealing with animals, people working with animals. I don't think there is such a thing.
Thank you, guys, for indulging me in that. We are out of time, and I heard they will kick us out if we don't move along. However, please join me in thanking these guys. We'd be remiss if we didn't just challenge you here after what you've heard today. These guys have offered some great opinions, some diverse opinions, something that you might run into on the produce aisle or your seatmate on an airplane. And where are we going to go from here? How are you going to take these conversations and the thoughts that have come out, and what are you going to do moving forward with that?
Yeah, I would challenge you, we talk a lot about generations sometimes, and right now, we know that the average age of farmers here in the U.S. is getting up there, and it's a different generation that was told to keep your mouth shut, keep your head down, work consistently, work hard. Don't respond to the negativity. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And that has worked to a point where the consumers that we serve decided that they want to know where their food comes from. And they want to know the story behind us. And the only way that we're not factory farms is when we're family farms and we're telling that story. And that's a real challenge because it's going against kind of everything that you've been brought up to do. Keep your head down, work hard. So maybe this is an opportunity that you get to engage that next generation and let them start a farm Facebook page, a blog that's brilliant and follows a great family around. Maybe it's welcoming people into the farm or following a child's passion to have an operation that has some agritourism. It's going to be up to all of us to change that perception and answer the call to consumers that just want to know where their food came from and want to know the story behind what they eat. So we really appreciate their time. Thank you all for your time, and we'll be around if you have any questions or thoughts. Again, if you have interest in an event like this, that we are going to do Farming Leaders again on March 25th at Blue Ridge Community College in Weir's Cave. And if you would like information on it, just scribble your email address and your name on a sheet of paper, leave it on the ends of the tables. We'll collect that and make sure we get information out to you. So thank you all very much.